For each of the weapons, you've got a projectile, primary, secondary, and then you have a list of options for the projectile in terms of what, like if it's a bullet or something coming out of the weapon or the item. The primary setup for it, though, in terms of what it does, is it's going to move an object, and it's essentially all of these are just simply saying how do you want the object to move. So we're going to start off with the first one, which is probably one of the more important ones. Uh, if you, with the weapon, you can tag items inside, build a game inside the editor scene. So if you want to use a different object that the weapon shoots out, you can use that. However, you can also just say if this is part of the weapon itself, then you can use the scaling here. If there's an override though with the brush that you've tagged, it'll actually change it to these values as well. For the scale though, we'll just say it's going to be 10 by 10, meaning it's the same size as this one. The offset is whether it's in front or behind again. So the weapon right now is set to 1. So if the offset here is set to 0, it'll be on the same plane as the player. And that might be kind of dependent on how you want to do it. You may want it to be a -1, so it goes behind the player, just in case it's something that's going to hit the player and be visibly seen across him. We have the option for lock shooting direction. So the direction, this is 0 through 7, so you've just got from up, right, all the way through around the circle. If you want to lock it, when you say lock shooting direction, it means that no matter what direction you're facing, you're only going to shoot this direction. Alright. The projectile ID, so again, this is going to be the bullet. So I'm going to say, if for instance I said use the self ID and we're going to say the ID was 2. That means that the ID of the projectile is 2. So it's going to be looking for, when other things are looking for it, if it's ID 2, then it'll know whether it's actually connected with it. Alright. The physics is just set up so that in terms of physics, think of this as a, you have the mass and the drag for the weight of it, but it's also primarily set up for the speed. So you can choose your force mode. Do you want force to come out constantly? Do you want it to be from 0 to a whole different value? Do you want it to go from a small value and continue to increase? Those are going to be how you identify with them, but one of the best ways to do it though is just inside a Build-A-Game. Click on the button, look at it, and then see how it's actually being applied to it. Also, you can look at the video for the Build-A-Game ones. It'll walk you through with more detail. The speed, though, you can say how quick do you want it to go across the screen. By default, maybe we want to move it about 6 or 7, or actually maybe even 8. Okay, based on the speed, how much do you want the impact to occur by the mass, the weight of it hitting another object? And then the drag is going to say whether or not the object is actually going to arc downward. So for instance, this being set to 0 is just going to fly straight. The torque is saying it's going to be rotating pattern. Do you want to rotate it to the right, rotate it to the left? By rotating it, you're actually saying that you do want it to move around while it's moving. It'll actually be moving the actual object in a circle. Upward force, if you actually have nothing set to here but you want to move, you want to shoot straight, but when you shoot you want it to just be going up or you want it to be going down with a force, you can apply those to it. Alright, and then after that point you can do, almost got it there, there we go. You can also, we'll go into the other ones here. For the pattern, you can have a pattern default setup. The default setup means that if you want to say that you want a shotgun style system, you can just enable this one so that when it comes in to build a game, it'll automatically be set with the right values. The preload bullet, just do, I would just say just do 1 for now. Sometimes you can do more, but if you place a lot of weapons in the scene, it's going to take up a lot of memory for that part. But for this one, if I choose none, what I can also do is say I want to be specific with it. I want to set my the bullet count to 7. I want the spacing, randomness, spread, and all those set to very specific ones. Right. So choosing how you want it to come out, you can do it this way by choosing the none, and then that's just going to be the pattern that actually shows up with it. Then you have 2 options here, projectile, missile, and boomerang. The missile, this is going to have a target option inside of the brushes that you can actually target other objects or items and stuff with. This is basically saying that once it shoots, it has the option to start heading towards a particular target. If it finds it, it'll continue to make it towards it, but if it doesn't, it runs out of fuel, it'll actually just, it'll either go away or fall. Um, so when it comes to those parts, that's basically the missile system for it. You can also do a find target with health. If there is no target with health, it's going to skip that one and go to the next closest one that it finds with health. The boomerang is set up so that you can actually throw an item out and then have a circular arc pattern. You can turn it's an elliptical, so you can actually make it a straight line out, straight line back. If you enable it here, yeah, you can actually say, for instance, return after it hits. If you want it to hit an object and instantly return, you can enable this. Otherwise, you can have it where it just continues to go through, and or if it hits, it actually goes away. So it's just depending on how you want it to be the approach for it. Throw distance. So again, looking at these, you're just simply saying how far out, how wide of the arc do you want to have on the going out to, and then how wide do you want it going back. All right, so with that one, the only thing by enabling it, you're just simply kind of changing the setup of, kind of like the missile, you're changing the setup of the projectile in terms of the behavior. So this will eventually become a lot more options where you have a lot of very core behaviors for weapon type and projectile type, and they'll be available through there. All right. And then let's see, last two here, we've got our projectile collider. So if you want it to collide, meaning you actually want it to be, you want to be able to hit it, you want it to hit something else, then you want to make sure the collider's on for it. The size of it, again, you could say 10 by 10. You're saying, by saying this, you're saying the entire square block is going to be a collider. But we know that our scale on this one, essentially, we want to take our vertical scale. We're going to say down to, I'd have to probably see it in build a game, but I think it would be around 3 to 5. And we'll set it for about 5 right there. All right. So that should do all the parts for this one. The one other thing just to take mention of is that on the collider there's that delay collider time. You may want it so that the bullet actually has, like, a bullet type could be you shoot it out, it doesn't actually do anything for 1 second of the shot, so that it can go through a wall and then it becomes a valid projectile where it's going to check for collision. So you can set things up like that for it so it has different behaviors there. Alright, and then the last part, collider type, I believe there's only support for cube right now, so if you change sphere and you don't get the impression of it, I think it's just one. I have to double check on that one. Alright, so then the last part is just you can change the color of your the bullets coming out, the projectile, so if you want to change a different color, you can that way with it. Alright, so those are going to be the basic property setup for the projectile. There'll be some additional ones here that we'll look at, but as a whole, this will be the basic setup.